Hello, beautiful souls. It's Dr. Danny, physician astrologer. Welcome to my channel. I wanted to take this opportunity to thank all of you for clicking on this link. It's really time to kind of call out the elephant in the room. I woke up yesterday morning to the Astrology podcast, which is actually one of my favorite astrology podcasts. Chris Brennan leads it and has just done some wonderful work on there. Has had some really amazing and knowledgeable guests. And he himself is a scholar and a giant in the field of astrology. I respect his work, bringing back the Hellenistic techniques and making them understandable for all. It's really quite an accomplishment. But he created his last episode in response to the New York Times article. Every few years, they will say, hey, your zodiac sign has changed. And over the years, it's just clickbait. But more and more people are actually realizing that this is true. And this is the work that I do. I do constellational astrology. So I listened to his podcast because I'm curious, what are his responses? What is his justification for not using the actual sky when he does astrology and calls himself an astrologer? And it was interesting. I think he missed a lot of points. I think from my perspective, he sounded more like a dogmatist. And I get it, defending what he's doing for as long as he's done. It's been the cornerstone of his career to use tropical astrology. So I get it. But I left a comment on that podcast. I said, hey, I love your work. You've taught me a lot. You've made me a better astrologer. Why don't you let me read your chart? And if I don't change your mind, I'll at least blow your mind. I promise. And I said, much love, thanks and love. That comment got deleted. So I feel compelled to create this video, not out of spite, but out of sort of love, and to go through some of Chris's arguments, where he missed the boat, where I think he's incorrect, and to offer, an opportunity to maybe have a conversation, constellational astrologer with tropical astrologer, because I am this close in recoining the name tropical astrologer to seasonal planetologist, because there is technical aspects to tropical astrology that work with the planets and their aspects to one another that tropical astrologers use, but they use it on the seasons. They use it on the months. They don't use it on the sky. And so for me, calling them an astrologer, a studier of the stars, feels inaccurate and unprecise. And so I am coining the phrase seasonal planetologist. I think that more accurately describes what Chris Brennan and others in tropical astrology are doing. So again, I offer this out of love, out of respect. I'm not trying to put anyone down personally here. I'm just trying to fill in the blanks that Mr. Brennan left behind. So with much love and respect, I am going to go through his transcript. And there are about 13 points, synchronistically enough, that I will hit on that I think he missed. And there are some points where I think he made a really good argument as well. So we'll go through all of that. So once again, I'd like to reiterate, I begin with respect. Chris Brennan is an excellent historian and an eloquent teacher. His recent video responds to the familiar media cycle that says everyone's sign has changed. And he's right that sensational headlines confuse people. He's also right that tropical astrologers have used a seasonal zodiac by deliberate choice for a very long time. Where we part ways is the premise that the seasonal zodiac is the primary or the superior map for all astrology. I and many others read the living sky, the actual night sky. And for those of you that don't know, there are three distinct reference systems. The constellational zodiac follows the literal star configurations along the ecliptic, where the sun travels. The sidereal zodiac abstracts those constellations into 12 30-degree sectors anchored to the fixed stars, with several schools using different anamshas, ayanamshas. The tropical zodiac anchors its 12 equal signs to the equinoxes and solstices. So, this right here takes tropical astrology out of the sky, out of the stars, out of the astrology, out of the astro part of what we do. And they deliberately put themselves into the seasons. I saw some of the questions in your chat, Mr. Brennan. So if we're doing seasons, then what if the ascendant's the most important, then what does that really mean? Well, it changes when you're looking at the actual sky. When you go outside on the date and the time that you were born and you look at the eastern horizon, that rising constellation is your ascendant. That's who you instinctually are. The planet that rules that constellation rules your entire sky. So it may or may not have anything to do with the sun. And that's really the heart of true sky astrology. It's that simple. I mean, even before tropical astrology, people pointed up at the sky and figured out personal connections to them. And then, of course, completely dismissing Ophiuchus. And we all know how important Ophiuchus is. If you guys haven't read my book yet, The 13th Sign, Ophiuchus and the Astrology They Don't Want You to See, Ophiuchus belongs in the conversation because the sun's ecliptic passes through it. And this is astronomy. This isn't marketing. This isn't clickbait or headlines. This is the path of the sun. And it is part of the zodiacal band. And constellations are not equal. You can't use that if you're doing astrology. You can do that if you're doing seasonology. But I would also ask that you please change the names of the beginning, the middle, and the end of your seasons, because you're confusing the crap out of people. When they take their star maps on all their apps and all their phones and all their iPads and all their computers, and they look up at the sky and they see that the moon is one sign back than what you guys are telling everyone, then they get freaking confused. And then you have to explain yourselves. And then I have to defend myself because everybody's believing that that's actually where the moon is. Okay. And then also, if you're doing seasonology, which is cool, seasonal planetologist using the planet's angles and aspects within the seasonal framework, there's nothing wrong with that. Planetology is a tool that I also use, but I put it in the sky. Okay. So what about the southern hemisphere, guys? That sky's completely different. You can't use seasonology for those in Australia and South America and New Zealand. You can't do it. What you're doing is only regional. So seasonal planetology should be regional. And if you're going to use seasonal planetology in Australia, then I suggest you change the names because it doesn't match. So when it's quote unquote fall season for them, it's actually spring in the northern hemisphere. So they need a completely different zodiac in the southern hemisphere. Again, I respect Chris and I respect his work, but and he says he knows about precession, and I'm glad that he does, and that they have chosen to go with seasonology. He makes no secret about that. But we do the same thing here. We choose the stars. We know the history. We know that of the time before tropical astrology, before astrotheology, before the decoder ring of the Bible came out. So when we look at these constellations and we look at Ophiuchus, we get precision. You can use planetology with the seasons and be somewhat accurate, but if you want to be precise, if you want to hit the bullseye, you just look up and you can literally verify it with your own eyes. So did your sign change within the tropical solarology system? No, it didn't, because that's defined by the seasons and the names remain attached to those season sectors by design. But within a sky-based system, when people discover that the sun they feel in their bones sits in a different constellation than the seasonal label they learned, it's not a gotcha. It's an invitation to look up and see what's always been there. And so my wish is really simple. Let's name our frames with care. Let the planetary seasonologist or the seasonal planetologist teach their seasonal mysteries and do it excellently. But let the true sky astrologers teach the stellar mysteries with equal excellence. Let the students know which language they're hearing before they decide which story sings true in their lives. So same sky, different maps, more honest labels. So what you see before you is literally the series of topics that he speaks. Luckily, he's such an organized presenter. And again, I have no ill will towards Mr. Brennan. I was a little upset that my comment got deleted because it was actually a kind comment. It simply disagreed And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to kindly disagree. And we'll go through some of these. So it's really up to you. What do you mean by sign? If you're talking about your sun sign and you're talking about seasons, no, I'm still a Leo sun. Okay, cool. In the seasonal planetology, I'm a Leo sun. But the day I was born, Star Soul, that star was sitting in the constellation of Cancer. And you can't change that. You can't tell me that that makes up for something or that that explains something by telling me it's about the seasons. So let's go through this. It shouldn't take too long for me to go through this. I literally have 13 reasons, and we probably already covered a bunch of them. So he opens up by talking about the media cycle and the rhetoric and the clickbait, and I agree. But many of us celebrate when we see this article because tropical astrology is 2,000 years out of date if you want to practice astrology. If you want to practice seasonology, you be you, keep doing you, love your work. Okay. I also agree. So that was thing one. We acknowledge that. I agree. Thing two, three zodiacs are defined. And so he goes through explaining where the different zodiacal systems came from. And that's very, very helpful. I encourage students or learners of astrology to simply listen to this because there's a lot of valuable information in here. And he covers constellational, sidereal, and tropical. And again, these are all different systems. The sidereal system uses the moon's energy, so it's not really talking about the sun and his ecliptic. Tropical astrologers are doing seasonal planetology, and then constellational astrologers are doing true sky astrology, and that is really the purest, most precise, most accurate form of astrology. Now, he does talk about the Babylonian standardization to 12 equal 30-degree signs, and he stresses the 5th century BCE shift from unequal constellations to equal signs. And so in the 5th century BCE, Mesopotamian astronomer and astrologers abstracted the uneven star figures into 12 equal 30-degree sectors to support ephemerides and calculations. That's the origin of the sidereal sign scheme as a mathematical convenience layered on a stellar backdrop. And this was a very convenient way to actually let astrology go underground when science became heretical in the early centuries of the Common Era. Falling back onto the 12 equal sign made it so much easier because you could take your stick, look up at the sky, and draw your circle on the sand and then sweep it away so that nobody sees what you're doing. So you could do this very sacred and special science of watching the stars without being labeled a heretic because it was simply a mathematical construct that you could keep inside of your mind. Okay. Then he goes on to speak about how it transformed in the Hellenistic systems using the Egyptian energy. So that's where planets, signs, and aspects and houses were codified. And I really feel like this tradition, these energies were codified based on the more ancient actual positions of the constellations. And over time, it has drifted. So that's thing four. And what we see is that all of that became the template for later Western practice. So I agree with all of his points so far. It's just I don't know that he really understands the nuances because he's so smart. He's so studied in the one area of tropical astrology that he doesn't see the bigger picture. That this was a wonderful system in order to save and codify the practice of astrology, but it was never meant to stay fixed in the seasons. It was meant to follow the stars. There's plenty of literature out there, especially when you look at Mayan traditions and how their gods died because the sky changed. And that's exactly why the Mayan calendar ends when it does, is because the solstice aligns with the galactic center. And if you don't even recognize where the actual galactic center is, you're going to miss that with seasonal planetology. So he recognized he does argue that the sign meanings and rulerships arose from seasonal light and heat, and that's because they were aligned. Back then in Ptolemy's time, the first day of spring was in Aries. The sun was rising in the constellation of Aries. but now it rises in Pisces on the first day of spring. And we have to recognize that. If we don't evolve with the cosmos, if we don't recognize that these ancient archetypes are aligned to us above, and we don't like click into that alignment, this is exactly why we don't feel like we belong here on Earth. It's because of this. So, he kind of goes into, I feel like there's a lot of over explaining and sort of mansplaining in here, just to sort of conflate some of the issues in the article with the amount of knowledge and nuance that's available to the argument. So he really does make a good argument for the seasonal logic and the planetary rulerships, but that's for developing the tool of planetology. And planetology is just analyzing the relationships between the planets, regardless of what background energy you use. And one of my colleagues, Abby, on Sumerian astrology, she always says this, I don't want my surgeon to be 23 millimeters away from the correct surgical spot. Like, you can do the most amazing surgery, but if you're doing it on the wrong organ, you're doing it differently. You're doing something else. And that's precisely my argument. Okay, so if you don't want to be dismissed by astronomers, then maybe we should start looking up at the sky. There's no reason you have to abandon all of the teachings that you learned in Hellenistic astrology. All of that still works. The house system's wonderful. I've learned so much from Chris Brennan on how to work with the house systems, and that really works. That's way, way accurate. But when you talk about Ophiuchus and you miss that, when you tell somebody that their moon is in Aquarius when it's actually in Capricorn, that can make a difference. And people actually really do feel that. So, to dismiss constellational astrology as like this new age movement, it's not. We're actually going back. We're going back to the sky. We're reconnecting. And so you can listen to this and learn a lot about this. And one of the other things I like about Chris's argument is that he says that there is a naming confusion, because when you name the seasons, the beginning, the middle, and the end of the seasons, the same thing as the constellations, you get confused. And so what I would suggest is that tropical astrologers or seasonal planetologists maybe rename your signs, and then try or dip your feet into the sky a little bit just to see if it resonates with you. I think I wanted to be a lot more, organized with that argument, but I feel like I've said everything that I wanted to say. So I would propose to those of you that are really stuck in your dogma, and really don't even want to listen to or have this conversation, could you just literally like rename your signs, because you're confusing everyone. When we are a cosmic civilization, we are headed for the stars. We are mapping our lives just as the ancients did, returning back to our home, which is the stars. And if we don't know where they are, if we get confused because somebody's putting a calendar in front of us or a season, the sun is only one star and the seasons are different all over the planet. Isn't it much more useful, especially as a global community, to help people all over the planet with a star map that's consistent with the stars? And I promise you, Chris, even though you deleted my comment, if you give me an opportunity to read your chart, I will either convince you to switch your signs, switch how you're reading your signs, or I'll blow your mind with how accurate my reading will be. So that's all I have to say. Again, I appreciate anyone who's here and listening. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. These are just my opinions. Please let me know your opinions in the comment section. As long as you're polite and kind, you won't be deleted from my channel. Although anyone that, says something nasty or rude to me, I will delete you. But if you have something to contribute or a point that you'd like to make that maybe I missed, then go ahead and leave your comments in the comments below. Give the video a like, subscribe if you're lurking, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks.